Philippa. Thank you ever so much for coming to join me on the International Classroom podcast today. For those people listening all around the world, and believe it or not, we do get a global audience. Whereabouts do we find you in the world today?
I am in Abu Dhabi at my home and now home office here in the Middle East, in the UAE.
Fantastic. So let's go back a little bit then to the very start of your educational journey. Did you do a PGCE? Did you do like the GTCs, the other training methods? How did you get into teaching?
Okay, probably a little bit different to most people. I had always wanted to be a buyer for clothing and jewellery, accessories, etc. And I actually worked for Claire's Accessories Global for their America and Europe team in Birmingham in the UK. And there was obviously a massive economic downturn, and I kind of was like, oh, what should I do? And found out that you could teach fashion in schools. And I was like, that'd be amazing. I get to talk about what I love all the time. I get to make things. I get to do things all the time with kids. And so ended up leaving and applying to go on a PGCE for what was the only way you could really do it at that point, or within the region that I was in Nottingham, which was to do design technology. So I did textiles with food and nutrition. And then I also got an engineering diploma on the side of it. And that's how I started off. And then I went into a school and taught edtech fashion, as well as food and nutrition, but also then ended up leading design technology departments in my NQT year. So I was kind of promoted to second and then head of department in that year, which was amazing. And just kind of fell into it from that, really. I was very much about, I really wanted to be hands-on. And so for me, the PGCE route was a really great way to be able to convert my existing fashion degree into something else.
Did you go to university in Birmingham originally then? Or did you just end up working there?
No, I just ended up working there. I actually commuted from Nottingham to Birmingham because my now husband, who was my just boyfriend then, we both lived and worked in Nottingham originally. And I went to Nottingham Trent for my fashion degree, and he worked in Nottingham, and we'd got an apartment there. So I ended up driving back and forth down that lovely road every day.
Oh, I have done that. I did that many a time myself because I went to Loughborough.
Yeah.
And then sort of from that area anyway, we lived just north of Birmingham. That's where I'm from, just north of Birmingham. So yeah, the M42, good old M42. Yeah.
Glorious. Dual carriageway, lots of lorries.
Yeah, the A42 into the M42. Yeah, I remember doing that a few times. So obviously then that sets the background for us in terms of how you got into teaching. But what is it then that brought you out to the Middle East?
So I worked for the same Academy Trust for 8 years, I think it was in the end, across a few different ones. There was obviously lots of takeovers at that point, and I moved across and restarted a design technology department for them, was there for about 4 years, and got to the point, I think I'd got the highest number of students taking my subject for GCSE and the highest pass rate of all the different GCSE subjects in school, including the core subjects, which was amazing. And then one day my head teacher said to me that they were going to cut the subjects, and I couldn't really understand why. And it was a little bit disheartening after I'd worked for so long to be able to do it all. And it all came down to finances. So regardless of the fact that I'd be the person at B&Q at the weekend trying to get all the pallets and all the extra wood and the nails and screws and going to Sainsbury's and writing to them for food supplies, it came down to budget, and mine was the most expensive subject, regardless of how many students took it. And in fact, the more students that took it, the more expensive it became. So they decided to take it away. And in a school where it was a very low socioeconomic area, needed a lot of support, actually, BTEC's GCSEs in these kind of hands-on subjects was really important. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit. And I was a bit like, this isn't really why I'm here. I'm here so that we can make a difference and change these kids' lives. And so I can see my eyes going, sorry. I absolutely just thought this is not what I'm here to do. And so at a similar time, Brexit happened, and my husband's ran his own business in Nottingham. And he was just like, if this kind of all goes through, potentially people's businesses and their additional money, which is kind of what his industry survives on, is probably not really going to be here. So what should we do? And we just thought, let's see what the rest of the world has to offer. Moved out here and found myself not necessarily teaching design technology, because actually here in the Middle East, there's very few schools, especially in the UAE, that teach DT. So I ended up teaching computing to primary school children, which was absolutely baffling, but very much in line with the kind of STEAM approach from my perspective was how I dealt with that and kind of went, okay, well, this is still a very cross-curricular subject. This is still something that I can kind of latch onto everything and bring together so that children understand it. And I absolutely loved it. It was incredible.
Yeah, because I think most people who know you or have seen any of the work that you do throughout LinkedIn or listen to any of your speeches or, workshops, whatever, I think they'd be really surprised to find what your background in education is, because I think you're just so seen then as this digital lead and this world of knowledge, fountain of knowledge when it comes to all things about digital. That it's quite surprising that you've gone from, trading off fashions and textiles to now having this huge influence, a global influence, as it were, almost on, education in edtech spaces and digital ecosystems and all those different things. Did you find then, I'm really curious, how did you find that sort of first couple of years when you're kind of just being thrown in to teach a subject, especially in primary in a new country? How did you find that?
Yeah, I think I remember having a conversation with the principal at the time, who was Rob Relton at Repton Abu Dhabi, and he was very, I kind of went to him with this big idea, and it was basically to teach STEM and to just forget about computing altogether. And he did just say to me, that's great, but that's not what you're here to teach. So try and mix it up. Of course, use that, but really push yourself a little bit further to think, what am I actually meant to be teaching? And obviously then it goes back to curriculum and looking at that and how it blends in. But I think those first couple of years, especially, so when I got the job, I spent the summer reading books about computing and how to teach computing. And that was the first time I'd ever been on Twitter. I reached out to loads of people I basically read one book that said, the first thing to do is go onto Twitter and follow. And then it had a list of all these people to follow and just see what happens. And organically, eventually you'll get to a point where you don't just want to like something, you might want to comment, or you might want to ask someone for some help or guidance. I started following quite a few people, like Mark Anderson, ICT evangelist, was one of the first people who ever came back to me with some support, and found that lots of people were there ready to kind of really help me on my journey as a computing teacher and as a primary computing teacher. And so that along with the fact that anyone who teaches design technology knows that for a start, to make sure that your subject always has relevance, you have to link it to every subject, specifically core subjects. You have to always recognize your maths, your English, your science, and then you have to make sure that you're being, looking at all the humanities subjects, and you're basically teaching everything anyway, which is very similar to what a primary school teacher does, which is that whole cross-pollination and kind of interdisciplinary learning. So I think had I been asked to teach maths, very different story, probably wouldn't be sat here today. But because it felt really like quite a natural progression as an addition to what I already did. So from my perspective, I would teach computer science, but I would teach it from an interdisciplinary learning kind of perspective. So everything was very project-based. Everything was very utilizing the subjects they were looking at, the areas they were looking at. All the experiences that I designed were always about the environments around them. So it was really tangible for them to be able to then understand what the links to computer science were and how to embed that. And it was really successful. The children loved it. I used to put a pretend space helmet on for year 3 when they were doing a Mars project, and then we'd go and play with robots. And it is, I think, all about those links, and probably really benefited from actually teaching something that is so interdisciplinary like design technology, because it's such a breadth subject. But I think getting to where I am now was very much about the people that I spoke to and connected with. And those people were people who were willing to have a conversation with me and answer questions that I thought were stupid questions but needed to know. They were the people that were sharing content, that were helping and supporting and kind of guiding in a similar way to, things like your podcast. It's opening people's eyes and getting them to listen to different perspectives. And it was that community that I never found in the UK that I found here, that was really supportive, and it was just a brilliant thing to be part of. And I think from my journey, I've always wanted to make sure that I'm giving back to that as well.
Yeah. I mean, STEAM here obviously being on the national agenda, isn't it? It's a huge thing, and we're seeing more and more schools now want to bring into this idea of maker spaces or innovation spaces or STEAM labs, whatever it is from there. So let's go from yours. So you've come into Repton, Abu Dhabi, and how long were you there for?
I was there for about 2 and a bit years. It was about 2.5 years, sort of left mid.
I'm just getting my bearings in terms. How long have you been in the Middle East for then?
This is my 7th going into 8th year.
Fantastic. So moved around in a few schools in Abu Dhabi, and obviously we're at that junction. I want to go back to the time where I first met you. So I first met you at Arbor School. So I think you were still teaching at that time. Yeah. And it was, funnily enough, for this. So that was the first time I came across you. And obviously at that time you were still teaching, and you'd managed somehow, I say this, to write a book, and amongst doing all of those things. So what inspired you to go out and write this book?
So I think from my perspective, it goes back to that kind of like connections with people. When I first started on this journey, so although I was teaching computer science at Repton, and then moving on obviously to Cranleigh and doing the kind of digital transformation, which is where the book came from, really was the time after that. And I think I'd obviously spent a lot more time speaking to a lot more people, building my own social profile, having those conversations and giving back a lot. And I literally was sat at the dinner table one day, and the boys had sort of cleared off the tables and done all the bits. And I was sat there and I got my laptop out straight away. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, someone messaged me and they needed to know something. And I really want to be able to get back to them." And I am a bit of a glutton for that. Like, I will try and respond to people. Like, I found myself in a conversation the other day and then had to politely say, "I've only responded because I don't want you to think I'm rude, but I'm really not interested in your service." But so for people, for educators out there who are reaching out, I wanted to make sure that I could give back something like I'd received. And so he just went, "Why don't you just write a book?" And I was like, "I can't write a book." And he was like, "Well, why not?" I was like, "Well, for a start, so I'm dyslexic. So obviously that my big barrier went up." And I was like, "Well, no, I can't write a book because I can't write stuff. No one want to read it. It'll be a big load of waffle, blah, blah, blah." And he was like, "But it won't, because you blog. And so even if you just put all your blog posts into a book, that would probably be really helpful." So I kind of reached out to John Catt Education and just said, "I've got this idea for this whole school system, because from my experience, what I'm finding when I'm talking to people and also when I'm actually working in schools is that all schools are having the same problems. They don't see it from the breadth. They don't see that umbrella. They don't see the safeguarding. They don't see the governance. They don't think about the actual education behind it. They don't consider their actual why, like, what am I doing before I even buy the technology? They buy the technology, they point at a teacher, and off they go. And that's kind of it. And I was like, consistently, that's just messy, isn't it? And it's never going to become something that has real scaffolds and real bridges behind it until people understand how many different areas there are that encompass digital learning and digital education. And from my perspective, and perhaps because of STEAM and teaching design technology and computing, I can see every bit of the school that it permeates. So for me, it was like, it was almost really important to say, it's not just in the classroom, or it's not just about your IT person having bought a load of tech that you've signed off on. There is so much structure that needs to go around this, and so much thought that needs to go into it. And so it just began to build. And then I basically just spent every sort of weekend just tapping away at the keyboard on my iPad and just wrote the whole thing. And I mean, I was very lucky. One of the things I didn't want it to be waffly and just be me. So I did leverage the people that I had spoken to and been in contact with. And I met some really interesting people as well. So I met Dominic Norris, who works in the UK. He now works for a not-for-profit, but he was working for a multi-academy trust. And he'd done lots of work and lots of governance work. And then I spoke to people like Al Kingsley, who's just incredible and supportive across the board, about what it means to be a governor, but also what it means to be a trust lead, and how digital learning can really support that, and how lots of people don't necessarily realize it. And just basically leveraged lots of that, and teachers and their voices, and brought it all together. And was really lucky that I kind of was able to find something from every little aspect of it that allowed it to bring it to life and allowed it to become what it is. I think there's definitely more that could have been said. Like for me, the last chapter could have been so big, but then equally, I'm very much of the consideration that every school is so different. And I really think that we have to consider that. And that's why it's so important to sit and look at your school's vision and look at where you're going and actually what do you need? Because lots of schools will want to be the absolutely forward-thinking innovators and steaming ahead with everything. And actually a lot of schools just want to do the right thing for the children that they're serving. Yeah. They just want to be able to do what they can with the budget they have. It doesn't have to be all singing or dancing. It just has to work. But with any of those, it doesn't work unless you've got a strategy, and it doesn't work unless you've really thought about what you're going to do and put those different things in place. And so the book really is about saying, okay, there's quite a few different things here, and you might have done some of them, you might not have, but maybe it's like an opening sticky notes in every so often and thinking, oh yeah, that's something that I need to do. And ideally, it's just a bit of a guide and a bit of a help for people. And I even still go back to it and look at it and kind of think, what am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, I was just, my head down, I was just flicking through it because one of the things, oh, look at that, I said to you earlier, didn't you? Signed it for me. One of the things that I kind of started scribbling around, but I kind of always just go, I went to the digital learning, 2021, this is when it's supposed to, I went to the digital learning part, but you go through, so you've got digital governance, safeguarding, and then cultivating and teaching and learning. And what's really good about this is, and we've had this conversation, but again, just to go back to it, it's still relevant for today. And the reason why I say this is because I see so much online, and you're probably in the same boat, about writing an AI policy. Let's just go write an AI policy. What's your take on that for all these things you see and for everything you go to where people say, well, we need to write an AI policy? Right, what do you think to that?
Oh, I'd say let's take a step back. Do you even have a digital learning policy? And it's really interesting. Yeah. I was doing a course the other day from National College, and it was like my update of safeguarding. And it was saying like there's so many of your digital policies that lead back to safeguarding. And actually the DFE have said that your online policy, your digital online learning policy, has to be directly linked back to your safeguarding policy because it's everybody's responsibility. Yeah. And I kind of go like, how many people are even at that point? How many people have even got one? How many people are still calling it an e-learning policy and not a digital policy? Because actually in the last decade, what we've gone from is we don't just have the internet, we have a multitude of platforms, access points, different devices, different modes of technology. And we can't just kind of keep going, oh, it's e-safety. It's digital safety. It's our world of what we need. I mean, my son came up to me the other day, he's 13, and he had a WhatsApp from the UAE bank. And I was like, and he just looked at me and he went, this isn't real, is it? I was like, no. So aside from anything, you don't have any bank accounts here. But equally, it was on a WhatsApp, and actually these are things that we need to be thinking about across the board. Schools are the most targeted for cybercrime, yet we don't have IT infrastructure at a level in most schools where that can be protected. And predominantly when I go into schools, training for IT support staff, so our admin side of it, is so few and far between. And much of it has been done because they do it off their own back and there's no kind of support for them. So I mean, as much as I love the fact that people are looking at AI and thinking about it, I do want people to kind of take that step and go, okay, but as a school, do we have equity of devices? Do we have equity of access for all of our staff, or are we still assuming that they're going to use their own personal devices and put themselves at risk safeguarding wise by utilising their own device to teach the children that they're employed to at our school? Do we have firewalls in place to keep those children safe? Do we have the infrastructure to be able to actually continue professional learning when it's a subject? I think I did a post on this the other day. It's a subject so Digital Poverty Alliance was saying that 48% of people will go off and do their own personal learning. However, the majority of teachers feel this is not the right word, unconfident. They don't have the confidence in what they're doing and understanding to actually take that on board and do something with it. So yeah, tick box, did my course, what are you doing with it? And what is the school expecting you to do with it, aside from just showing them a piece of paper? And actually, it's all those different levels of it that we have to build into our processes of what we're doing. Now, it's funny, you'll get people and they'll go, oh yeah, but we'll have a day for digital. Actually, you know what? Scrap the day. Don't do a day for digital. Just say, today we're talking about safeguarding, and these are the things that we do digitally to ensure safeguarding. And then do your curriculum and learning. These are the devices and the systems we use, and this is why. Okay, we're not using technology all the time, but we're using it meaningfully because it's built into the pedagogy that we're looking at. That's what we should be doing. And this whole AI policy element is just a tick box for people to say, oh, we're part of it, we're modern, we've done it. Or the fact that their fear factor is driving them to say, well, actually, we need to stop it because we don't allow mobile phones and we don't allow this and we don't allow that. So we mustn't allow AI. And then not really considering what that means. And so I think on a broader perspective, people need to just sort of take a bit of a U-turn and say, okay, where are we at digitally? Because AI is part of that. It's not separate. But actually, if we haven't started our digital strategy, should we really be starting our AI strategy?
Yeah. I've had some conversations with different people about that, just in terms of, if you get it right, then realistically, an AI policy goes into a digital strategy, and actually your digital strategy goes into your teaching and learning strategy, because fundamentally, what we want the use of, let's say, this technology to do is to improve teaching and learning for all. You mentioned equity, didn't you? Yeah. And obviously there's this idea of, and I'm going to come back to this, kind of ties into the question I want to go, because you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Some of the best PD I have in terms of when I did an MPQ was they looked at, as you set up a professional development program for staff, it's like, think about how you approach it for students. Like most people in a traditional classroom, how do you start a lesson? There is some element of retrieval or recall. And we would all go, well, cognitive science, even though there's many facets to it. But we say, well, we've got this forgetting curve, haven't we? We all know, as teachers, we all know this. We know about this forgetting curve. If then students, we're not asking them, if they're not getting to recall them. And that kind of just ties into everything you just said. It's like, well, we do a one-off. We do a day. It's like, what in the space in between those things, what's happening to our teachers' knowledge? If they've done a course, so again, but the competence that we say, we've got confidence and competence, they might be competent in doing it, but they won't be confident because they're not using it daily. And so it kind of brings into this really interesting idea of the continued use of it and allowing space for teachers to continue to do it. But the reason why I mentioned the PD is because you mentioned something there about the National College. And obviously, one of the questions I have for you, and you've posted a little bit about this, is as someone who does go out into schools, and we'll come to that in a second, as someone who is, you know, at this forefront and people look to for information, where is it that you find your resources? Where is it that you go to keep up to date on sort of your skills?
Well, obviously National College. I partner with them because, well, for the past 7 years, I've worked alongside them and the team. So Joe Stoney and I met at a conference about 6-7 years ago. And it was something for me that specifically it was the online safety side of it that I was looking at originally. And so I started to work with them. And obviously, as a benefit of that, I get to look at all their resources and I get to utilize their courses myself as well. But they have such a breadth of stuff that goes into their professional learning, and it allows me to do it on my own self-paced. And when I do mine, and lots of people do the same, is they will then take that and implement it and add it into what they're doing. For a lot of my things, it's considering how policy updates need to be done. So for instance, something like the online safeguarding DSL training that I did the other day, that's me now thinking, okay, so if I was helping a school write a policy, what am I going to be embedding into that? And so for me, somewhere like that is brilliant because it's a sort of a one-stop shop really for policies, for professional learning, for listening to other educators, which is great. In addition to that, I guess I'm constantly on things like LinkedIn and things and bookmarking and page marking all of the different white papers or different reports. I get the McKinsey thing sent to my inbox every week because it's always got some quite interesting statistics and information, which I kind of guess pushes you off on a little tangent. You kind of think, well, if that's a statistic there, well, how is that impacting in schools, or how is that impacting certain types of schools and things like that? So it sort of really depends. I mean, I was talking to Ben Bolger the other day from Squirrel Education when we were on our run. And we seem quite similar. We'll put on a podcast to do our learning, but then all of a sudden our brain just disappears off into these little tangents and areas. And I think so, again, podcasts are brilliant. And it just, as I'm running, I start thinking, oh, well, maybe I should have a look into that. And then I could look into that. And so then it's finding the good sort of places for those bits of information. So obviously people like ISC Research write their white papers. They've got some really interesting information there. But then things like Guess and Bet, when they do their speakers talks, they have lots of information that comes with that. And it's just about finding the right narrative, but also keeping on top of things like, for me, the Casey report annually is a really important report to be reading. Looking at things like the NSPCC in the UK, looking at the government updates that are happening. Things in Australia are absolutely incredible for education, and especially digital learning, because they are so far ahead in some of their regions. It's incredible, like absolutely outstanding. And it sort of depends, I think, because of the umbrella and the nature of digital learning. I'm just constantly looking out for things, and it might be things that I just then store. So for instance, things on LinkedIn, I bookmark and I think, oh, I'll read that later. It's not something in my headspace right now, but I want to go back to that. And then I'll every so often kind of look through that and think, oh, I definitely saw something. Where was it? And then it's just, I guess it's having that professional network as well, and just kind of speaking to people and making sure that you stay up to date on certain things and stay in the conversations with things about what you're doing and talking to other educators. So I think there's many ways. I've got lots of podcasts. My favorite podcast is the EdTech podcast. I've listened to it for absolutely years. It used to be Sophie Bailey. It's now a lady called Rose Luckin, who is a professor in the UK. And they interview people globally, but very much about just EdTech and about the research behind it and the impact. So I find things like that are really helpful, especially when I'm talking to schools about what they can get from it, because a lot of people want to see the impact of it straight away. It's quite helpful to be able to have those little nuggets of information for people.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Some really good advice there. So thank you. So let's kind of fast forward now. Let's go to this of how you've transitioned, for those who obviously we've alluded to it, but transitioned from teaching and being in the classroom to where you are today. And you mentioned, I'm just kind of go through this journey a little bit, because I'm curious to ask you about this. There are some fantastic initiatives that you are aligned with. And one of the things I'm really interested in as we kind of trace this journey is about women in EdTech. Because I previously spoke to a lady called Gabby Immelman. She runs Mindjoy South Africa, and I asked her about this. And I'm fascinated by sort of your take of it, like when you were starting and as you're doing now, like the people that you're reaching out to. How do you find being a successful, I'm just going to say female, but a successful female in this EdTech space? How have you found it?
I think initially I founded along with a couple of other people, Linda Parsons and Victoria James, the We Edu, and we did it because we found it really hard to be in the Middle East and to kind of be able to feel empowered in a variety of different ways. And actually, a lot of the story that I kind of brought to that team was actually from the UK as well, and being made very much to feel that because I was a mother, because I was in design technology, which is not a kind of priority subject, and for lots of other reasons, I was pushed aside quite a lot. It was like, oh, she's just kind of the bouncy, enthusiastic person. We don't really want her on the leadership team. She'll just annoy everybody. And it was very much, I had my son when I was quite young, and even down to things like making sure that I had somewhere to go to be able to have basically express milk for him. I was put in the cleaner's cupboard at work, because that was where women went, because you shouldn't be back at work because you're a mother, and what you should really be doing now is actually either going part-time or just quitting. And that was really hard, especially kind of growing up when I did it. It was beginning to be that point of time where women were being more empowered and women could do jobs. And my dad was a vicar, and I remember the day that the first woman got ordained, he was so excited, because in his head he was like, wow, that's it, you can do anything, you can even be a vicar now. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's not my path, but good news. And so, when you then get into that world of work and you realize that actually most of the senior leaders are male, that was really hard. And then you also get this kind of in primary schools, because predominantly it's a female-led kind of area, you actually get a lot of men in senior leadership because they need the male role models. So you're kind of battling against all these different things. So when Linda reached out to me and sort of said, look, she was struggling in different ways as well, and she just wondered whether it might be something that we could bring together. And I think I've always kind of been, I don't know, not vocal in kind of like a kind of antagonistic way, but just empowering women. And I think it's really important to say, we're here and this is what we do, and we do it just as well as everyone else. And I'm not expecting to get a job over somebody else because I'm a woman, but I expect to be treated equally for it. And I genuinely think that is the case. And I wrote a blog about it from like, who are we, women in education? It's somewhere on the internet somewhere. Because I did come into probably the worst time. I was at a school and my principal basically told me that I didn't need to be on the senior leadership team and that I had more important things to focus on. And those important things were my children. Now, one, that showed me that person didn't know me very well at all, because my children are the most important thing. Like, I will do absolutely anything for them. In fact, that's probably the majority of the reason why I'm here today, is because they are so important to me. And actually they're boys as well. So I'm very much like, you want a strong female role model. You want to see that, mum can do everything and also, do some crazy activities with you. What he didn't realize about my family dynamics is actually that my husband does an awful lot of that, because he was self-employed and always has been, that he would do the pickups and the drop-offs. But we also had a very specific thing. We sit down for dinner every night together around the table, no devices, no nothing, even though, we've got teenagers and everything else. And we're all there and we have a conversation. We sit down, we talk, we discuss what we're going to do. I remember we were talking about moving to China at one point, and I said to somebody, we discussed it. And they were like, oh yeah, but with your husband. I was like, no, we discussed it as a family. It's a family decision. And that was really baffling to them. But so there is this perception, and I would say it generally is from older people, that you can't do all that, or that you would have to do it because no one else is going to. And I think actually when you can get that right balance. And so for me, it was about saying to other women, you can do whatever you want to do, and it just has to be right for your situation. And that's going to be different for everybody. Some women don't want to have children, and that's okay. Some women want to be at home, and that's okay as well. And some women want to be at work, but want to come home and do the switch role reversal and actually only see their kids at the weekend. And that's fine. And it's kind of about empowering that in a place, I guess, where that potentially is still seen as a very traditional role. And we've very much always been in tandem as well with Women Ed. So the Women Ed Middle East region. So we support that chapter and we do things in collaboration with them, and we always have our guest breakfast. But I think the most important thing for us was that always when we meet people, or we have a coffee morning, or we do a kind of a breakfast chat or what have you, everybody is just so grateful just to have women to talk to be able to say, you know what, I don't know if this really worked, or actually I went to this interview and it went like this, and I don't know if that was the right thing for me to have done. What do you think? And actually to have people who are a safe space to reflect to without feeling judged. And that doesn't actually even have to be because they're a woman. It just is knowing that you have somebody. And that really for us is what it's all about. And it's about just raising people's profiles when they're doing really great things, supporting each other when we're doing great things, and actually supporting each other when we're maybe not doing great things, but we don't feel great either. And so I think that was just really important for me, and I know for the other girls as well.
Yeah. If people want to find out more about that initiative or get in contact, and we'll put this in the show notes, but where's it? Do you have pages or links or anything particular we can pass on to people?
So we have the LinkedIn page, which is We Edu. And then obviously if you get in touch with myself or Vic or Linda, then one of us will be able to point you in the right direction as well. And we always do an annual breakfast at Guess. This will be our 4th year this year. And it gets bigger and bigger, which is wonderful.
It does. I was very fortunate last year to walk. I think I was doing something at the same time with Russ, and we walked past it, and it was immense. It was just like, it was full. It was big. So it's fantastic work. And as you say, there are some women who want to kind of be their own boss, aren't there?
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, you have, as we continue on this journey transitioning out, like, done that, haven't you? You have taken that full step away. As one of my friends mentioned the other day and got called out for this on LinkedIn, it's like, you just parachute into schools. And I love that term. I find it hilarious now. It's like, but that is kind of what you've decided to do. So tell us more about this journey you're on and where you're at right now. Yeah,
so I have to say, very empowered by other women who've constantly been telling me that you can, because it's quite scary. Yeah. There are times when I kind of go, oh my God, have I done the right thing? This is really might not be working. And then you just realize that actually you've only been doing it for 2 months and it probably is absolutely fine. So that's one thing. But yeah, I am absolutely loving it. I did find myself, we have a dog and took her on a walk. Totally normal, right? Excepting I was doing it at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and my husband rang and he was like, what were you up to? Totally normally, no kind of accusation or anything. And I was like, I'm just out with Frankie, but I was listening to a podcast and I was learning at the same time. He was just like, I don't care. I just wondered if you wanted to go for a coffee. And so there is something about being your own boss that is also a little bit weird, because you've been so used to being in certain time zones and certain things and doing certain meetings and structure that you have to get used to. But yeah, I guess parachuting is quite an interesting way to say it. I've been doing some work with quite a few schools across the Emirates, which is really incredible. I know all about, obviously, digital leadership, digital strategy, and about putting some consistencies in place, which is really interesting. But also, and I think people say this, don't they? When you start your own business, you think it's going to be one thing and then it probably ends up being another thing. I've found that there's a lot of people that have reached out for me for things that I never thought I would even get asked to do, which has been really exciting and actually leads into that whole professional development and learning thing. Is, for me, if I can benefit by understanding or learning something a bit more and actually do it for my job, that's amazing, right? And then I can kind of spearhead that onto a range of different things and also use it when I go into schools, is actually having more knowledge. So I've set up and I do mentoring for people who are aspiring digital leads within their schools, which is incredible. I've got some absolutely beautiful people that I speak to on a monthly basis, which is really nice. And again, just if I can share that knowledge and support, it can be quite a lonely role in a school because it still isn't seen as being part of the full kind of establishment, which is a shame, but I think is going to change massively. I do literally deep dives with schools as well, so I can go in and sort of help pinpoint where they need to go, so they've got a direction. And I go in and also do long-term strategies with people as well, so which is really exciting. So it's kind of bringing the book to life, really. I'm very excited because I'm going to Italy next week as part of it for digital well-being, which is a huge thing that I'm trying to really get off the ground as well, which is amazing. And I've got a big UHQ conference at the end of the week after, all about digital wellbeing as well, which is kind of where you get to when you've got a really good strategy, from my perspective.
So just whereabouts in Italy? Just
Rome.
Curious. Oh, the best part then, one of the nicest parts. Is that for a big conference? Is it just little schools? It's
to record some education talks with a company who I'll let you know at some point.
Watch this space. We'll watch this
exactly.
Space.
And then also just like a keynote on digital wellbeing and digital infrastructure, and how actually having certain pillars in place can really support the overall well-being of everybody in the community. Amazing. Which is brilliant. Yeah, amazing. Really cool.
I mean, I looked at the website, and obviously you've seen a lot of it posted on LinkedIn, and I looked at the name that you've given it, and I thought, geez, that must have taken you an absolute age to decide on the name you wanted to give your company. How did you come about? I'm joking, but I'm being sarcastic.
Normally I think of something and then I tell a few people and they're like, Like with the digital ecosystem, I was laughed at. Everyone was like, what do you mean an ecosystem, a digital ecosystem? And I was like, yeah, it makes sense, because it's like fully living thing that, you know, an ecosystem is. And now look at it everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Totally going to put that down to my book, trendsetter.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, Edruption, obviously, well, initially it was education disruption, obviously together, which is what it is. And then that was the kind of tagline. And then a few people had said, and quite rightly so, that educators and leaders might be a bit fearful of disruption. And actually the idea of empowering change is more what I want to be able to do. And it's about that, again, going back to equity, is something that I really want to be able to support schools to do. And another side of it, I've actually ended up starting a bit of a not-for-profit arm already, which I probably shouldn't have. And I know that, again, talking about my husband quite a lot, he was frowning at me as if to say, like, I'm not really sure you're ready to do things for free like that. But I can't really help it when I feel like people really need the support. Like, I just think why not? Like, you know, if I've got an extra hour to do, and they really are in need, and I think that's really important. So I've set up some education outreach. I've been putting some funding into the government here as well to do parent workshops and support parents in building that digital bridge. And so I'm hoping that the Edruption is about empowering change, but across the world, in whether you're in an educational institute, whether it's bridging that gap for parents and their children, whether it's being able to support with safeguarding or just understanding digital world and bringing up digital natives, then that's what this is all going to be about. And it's just really exciting to see it kind of all develop and grow.
Wow, it's amazing, and it's deserved. I think well deserved for the work you put in beforehand, and obviously what you can offer now. And I've got the last time I checked, I think I had about 25 different countries who listened. So just out of curiosity, is there anywhere that you want to go to, just in case? You know, we'll throw name drop that one out there.
I'll go anywhere. I love traveling. I think that's one of the really exciting things. I went to India in August, and I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get a taxi to go and see things in India, because otherwise I wasn't going to get to go. And I hate that idea. You know, people say, oh, I travel a lot. And you say to them, well, you must have seen so much. And they're like, no, not really, just kind of in the conference, then you go home. And I'm just like, why? You can't do that. You've got to get out there. So I will go to all sorts of places. And I think as long as it's for the right reasons and it's an interesting project, I think, because one of the things that I'm doing as well is I really like this idea. There's a lot of obviously schools that don't have budgets, don't have massive amounts of budgets, is this idea of communities coming together and bringing together schools in similar groups that have got like minds to be able to help them as almost like a cluster. So that they can work together. And I'd go around all the schools and we would support each other to build strategies and to build this sustainable digital systems that can actually help them to thrive. Because I just think the idea of us all kind of trying to keep it all together and pretend that it's like some magical secret that we've got inside the school is ridiculous. And there are so many schools around the world that need help and support. And if actually teaming up together to do that, then let's do it. Let's stop pretending that we have to be the ones that found it all and did it all ourselves, and just work together. It's education.
That's amazing. Oh yeah, I completely agree. Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. Yeah. So, there we go. I'm just going to pivot slightly. Now, you mentioned something earlier, obviously, about family time, and obviously family is important to you. But obviously, with the world that we're shifting into now, there is a lot of emphasis on screen time. There's a lot of emphasis on technology. Mm-hmm. But for you, how do you kind of then find that release away from it? What is it that you are doing, and probably would then maybe just recommend if someone said to you, like, I need to get away from my screens, what should I do? What are the things that you like to do to kind of decompress and get away from the screens?
Well, first of all, for anyone else, they have to find the thing that makes them tick. And I would say that's probably not something that you found on TikTok or something else. That's someone else's thing. So I very much like what I've got into actually in the habit of at the moment is in the morning exercise. Like I just like to kind of work out, and it helps me to really process everything. Like I said to you before we started, did a 10K run this morning. Just find it helps my thought process and my writing. But actually, I think I do exercise more to help me process my work. And actually what I love to do, and it's something that not very many people know about me at all, but I guess goes back to my roots, is I like to quilt and I like to do like sewing and textiles. But yeah, mainly that, because I absolutely zone out and I don't think of anything else other than the fact that it has to be exactly the right size and exactly the right shape and exactly the right thing. And it's that creativity of doing something just totally different. Like, people laugh at me because actually I get home and I am the least techie person in the world. Yes, we've got all of the screen time set up and all that sort of stuff. But actually anything that is powered in our house, that's anything technological, has absolutely nothing to do with me. And I probably do that a little bit to sort of, to have that disconnect. But I just don't care. It doesn't feel relevant. I'm like, as long as the TV turns on, then that's okay. But I would absolutely, like, my big thing would just be to absolutely switch off, just get the sewing machine out and just play around. I love it. It's my favourite.
Can the boys sew?
They can. They're a bit scared. They're a bit scared of the sewing machine because, it goes fast. And obviously when you put your foot down on the pedal and it goes even faster, surprisingly. So God forbid when they start to drive.
Yeah, I'm scared of the sewing machine scare me. I'm always worried that, like, I'm going through and I'm going to sew it through my finger. Like, it's a bit of a weird one. But again, unfortunately, going back to screen, there's a guy on YouTube called Marco. And he's one of those, I don't know if you've come across him. He basically takes sneakers, so American of me, takes trainers' sneakers and will customize them for all sorts of different people. So he'll like unstitch them, paint them, dye them, stitch bits onto them. And my kids found it on YouTube and I started watching. I was like, this is so cool. Yeah. It's like those art type of guys who do stuff. So there you go. That could be the next thing for you. But the reason I say that is because he's got this sewing machine and it's going super slow and just stitching things through.
Because you can go at the pace that you want to go at. You don't have to like fly through it. No, I love stuff like that. I found myself the other day cutting the tops off bottles and putting socks over it and getting food dye and then bubbles and bubble mix. And my 9-year-old and I were making an absolute mess, but blowing colourful bubbles all over the balcony because we'd seen it and we thought, well, that looks easy. Let's see if it'll work. Yeah, it was really fun.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. It was really cool. I'll send you the video.
That'd be amazing. I'd love to see that, a little bit of science and design.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because then the teacher in me was like, how do you think it works? And he was like, I don't know. And then we tried it, with kitchen roll and everything else.
I had this, my kid, we were obviously here at spring break in Eid, so we were away, we got back yesterday, but one of my youngest was drinking out of her, say like a cup from this. She had a straw in there and she was drinking from the bottom, but she was like, why is it going down from the top if I'm drinking from the bottom? I'm like, that's my 8-year-old question. I was like, science, Dad. Trying to explain. But before I was all excited, ready to jump in. And then my eldest, who's 10, she then jumped in and explained it to her. And I'm like, oh, you just stole my thunder. Okay. But at the same time, I was like, this is so cool that you can talk about that and particles. That's
really cool. Yeah. We'll look forward to it because then the neuroscience kicks in when they become teenagers. And my eldest son, who is 13, almost 14, after I had my hair done yesterday, said to me, does your hair not grow? And I was like, what? He went, it's always the same length. And I was like, oh, darling. And there's definitely things that my 9-year-old now tells him, and he used to tell his younger brother, but now has seemed to have forgotten it all and waiting for that point where all the grey matter just decides to fuse back together and he has normal conversations again.
It's the hormones. It must be the hormones.
Absolutely. It must be the hormones.
Otherwise, because I don't want to say it, but otherwise I'm going, maybe it's that rugby thing. I don't know. Don't know if it's good for him. And I'm sitting here, I'm like,
don't say that.
I'm the biggest rugby advocate there is. I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, massive rugby mum here.
I know. I saw some of the photos enjoying life in London.
Yes, we did. They won all 5 matches at Rosslyn Park. Absolutely stormed it. Yeah, hilarious with all the mud, though, for the boys in the UAE that they'd never played in wet mud. They were slipping all over the place. It was really funny.
Yeah. I got one of the guys, obviously one of the boys who was involved, I coached, so I know his dad. But is there another tournament? They're meant to be potentially going to another tournament.
We're off to Venice in May.
That was it.
Yes.
That was it. Amazing.
So we're now, it's a 15s there as opposed to a 7s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That'll be good. Yeah, I watched I was watching the YouTube of it because obviously Simon Cook who was helped to organise it, obviously know very well. And they sent the YouTube link through. And it was just, as the commentator was going, it was a who's of name dropping schools that kids are going to. It was like, this boy's scholarship here, this boy's scholarship there, he's off to here. All for the sports. It was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But there's good. That's the benefit of being your own boss, being able to go and do those things.
And like I said earlier, honestly, they are my driving force, because there was a point where I was a bit like, so he's got a scholarship for rugby and is going off to boarding school next year, which was something that was not on our radar in the slightest, but he is just good at it, or very good at it. And the idea of not being able to drop him off because of being tied to a school, whereas now I get to go to all these incredible places, like the week before spring break and in the middle of May for that's not what teachers get to do. So also very, I guess, some part selfishly, but also, very excitedly get to be mum on the side everywhere.
It'll be amazing. And that rugby circuit will be amazing.
Yeah.
The circuit they play on will be phenomenal. And so all the best to him. And now, he can sew as well, so he's not going to have any problems with
Exactly.
There we go.
There you go. Amazing. He doesn't want to take it for GCSE though, which is a little bit sad. He wants to do food. He has said he'd like to do food and nutrition. So
yeah, well, it makes sense with if you're thinking from a sports background, you can still help him out with that. To draw a close to this, and it's one thing I've kind of started doing just to get people thinking and see if there is. But what is the one question I haven't asked you that I should have today?
Oh, I don't know why I wasn't expecting that. I don't know. Maybe. Oh, I've absolutely no idea. It's just totally gone. I don't know. Maybe where would I be in 5 years' time or something like that?
Let's go with that one then, because obviously you said you're 2 months into this journey.
Yeah.
Let's phrase around. What is the legacy that you would like to leave with Edruption, and the impact that you want to have then on the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem in the educational landscape?
I would like to empower schools to realise that it's not all about spending lots of money. It's about consistency, and it's about learning, and it will take time, and pivoting halfway through a journey and spending lots more money isn't going to get them there. And actually, if Edruption can help support some of those schools that are less well off, that don't have that support, that maybe are too small to have that kind of support network, to be able to be empowered to support their students and their learners, then that's what I want to be able to do. And I want to be able to do that globally. So I'd like to find other people who are like-minded to be able to kind of join forces with, partner up with, to build Edruption, and just empower schools to be more confident, to build it into their systems. So it's just what we do, which is where you get to that well-being element, instead of it being this consistent requirement to upskill, to need to know more, to change, to swap platforms and all the rest of it. Actually, just that consistency that can help everybody get to a place where education isn't overwhelming and the workload isn't overwhelming, and that actually we just are able to teach again. And that's what I'd like to be able to get to.
I think it'll be amazing, an amazing legacy to leave. So for those people out there watching and listening, if they want to find you, want to find out more about Edruption, where can they go to make contact with you?
They can go to my website, which is www.edruption.com, or on LinkedIn. I am just Philippa Wraithmell. I am Mrs. Wraithmell on X, which I keep calling Twitter, but X. And I also have opened Edruption, and I think it's _24 on X as well. For when I grow and I'm bigger, I have also done the other socials in anticipation for someone really cool and savvy who knows about TikTok to come on board and do all that kind of stuff. But not yet.
soon to come. I still can't really get X. So I was speaking to someone about the other day, is do I need to put the podcast on X? Should I put the podcast on X? And I'm just like,
yeah,
I kind of I'm not bothered by it.
I don't know. I used to be a huge fan of Twitter, and when it turned to X, it was just before a summer holiday, and I kind of thought, well, I turn all my notifications off. I used to anyway. I actually don't have them on so that they come out through. I have to go to the apps to get them. But I turned them off for that summer, and and it changed and into X. And there was something, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want to go back. And I kind of haven't. I've sort of lost my momentum on there a little bit. I am trying to build it a bit, but it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Well, maybe when you get your social media marketer, shout out maybe anyone who's interested in doing some freelance. We'll go with this, freelance.
Freelance, definitely.
But no, Philippa, thank you ever so much for coming and speaking with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure just to learn about what you've done and what you're doing and the type of things that you want to bring into education. It's fantastic. So thank you again ever so much.
No, it was lovely to speak to you. Thank you for having me.